Hey, how's it going? I've got some stuff that I have to do. I'm going to try to make this video short. That last one was over an hour, right? So I don't have a whole bunch of things. Well, I do. I always do. I'm only going to go over a couple of these tabs. I'm going to go over 4 of them, 2 videos, 2 articles. I'll have links in the description below for both the videos and links to both the articles. So if you want to watch the videos, read the articles, you can. But it's just, I just see all of this lying and manipulation going on, and there are some people out there who do a really good job of digging into what the truth is, the due diligence behind all of this stuff. And again, I tell you what, Thomas Sowell is just amazing. Whenever I just listen to him speak, whether if it's just being an interview or a debate with someone else, or just an insert from one of his books, it's great. So we have another one. This is from Thomas Sowell TV. Title of it is Thomas Sowell Debunks the Myths Surrounding the Black American Community. And he just goes on about how the 1960 race riots and Martin Luther King and all that marching on Washington, kind of garbage. But the best thing is that he just doesn't say it, he proves it. Because he has information, he has facts. In this case, he has figures about the jobs.
Or even primarily, to the removal of these barriers by civil rights legislation. The rise of blacks into professional and other high-level occupations was greater in the years preceding passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 than in the years following passage of that act.
So what they're talking about is that in the 60s, they had all these civil rights activists out there saying that we need to do more for the black community. And Thomas Sowell is saying, you didn't do a damn thing. You made things worse. Because everything was actually progressing before you did a damn thing. And he's going to prove how after the civil rights movement, things slowed down and went in the opposite direction.
What had happened was a dramatic increase in the numbers of blacks with college and postgraduate education. Prior to the First World War, fewer than 5,000 college degrees had been granted to black students in the entire history of the United States.
So after World War II, there were African Americans who were getting their college degrees. Weren't very many of them. Up since the founding of the U.S., up to World War II, only 500,000. It's not a lot.
But by 1935, that had increased 5-fold. And by
until World War I, because World War II didn't happen until 45. Or our involvement when we got in at the U.S.
47, the black colleges alone granted in 1 year more degrees than blacks had ever received in all the years prior to the First World War.
And so, okay, this happened before the 1960s and the civil rights stuff. So this stuff is already by itself getting better without the government. That's the key takeaway. I'm sure that there are absolutely plenty of people who are part of the civil rights stuff that, they just didn't know. They thought they were doing good, looked good, seemed good, all that kind of stuff. Don't blame them at all.
Increases in the numbers of doctorates received by blacks were also dramatic. Similarly, despite a widespread tendency to see the rise of blacks out of poverty as due to the civil rights movement and government social programs of the 1960s, in reality, the rise of blacks out of poverty was greater in the 2 decades preceding 1960 than in the decades that followed. Education was a major factor in this as well.
So before all this stuff happened in the 60s, not only were they going up, but they were going up a lot. And then after the 60s, not so much. It slows down. We'll see if he says by how much. I don't think so.
As of 1940, non-white males averaged just 5.4 years of schooling, compared to 8.7 for white males. Over the next 2 decades, the absolute amount of education increased for both, and the gap between them narrowed. In 1940, the difference in schooling between black and white young adult males, aged 25 to 29, was 4 years.
So part of the problem is that people don't know what they're talking about. They only live in their own little world, and they don't understand a bigger picture. They don't understand that, all right, well, 9% of white men are graduating college, and 8% of black men are graduating college. And the stupid part, it's that they don't understand that there's a larger base number of white people than there are of blacks. So in other words, there are more whites in the U.S. than black people. So even though they're both 9%, you're not going to see the same amount of black men and white men at college campuses because there's just more whites. But people are stupid and they think, oh, well, 9% of black men and 9% of white men, I should see just as many black men as I do whites. It's like, no, there are more white people. And people are absolutely stupid like that. Some because they're just unaware. Maybe they think, no, there's more blacks than that, right? Surely that's not right. And others are just, I don't know, there's plenty of reasons. Some take this on as kind of their form of religion whenever they don't have one. That's why you cannot, you're dealing with someone whenever they don't want to have a discussion about it because they've kind of had this leap of faith and they don't have anything to prove to you.
By 1960, that had shrunk to less than 2 years. Because this was an era of massive black migration out of the South, this quantitative narrowing of the gap in schooling may well have been accompanied by a qualitative improvement, as many blacks left behind the low-quality schools in the Jim Crow South.
I think that is just really important to highlight as well, is that he's talking about how much better the school systems got. And part of it was because they left the South, went to the North, where the school system in general was better.
How did this translate?
Which that means that if you really want the school system to be better, then something like a voucher system would be better than what we have now, because that would give parents the ability to take their kids out of the trash schools that we have today and to go to better schools. Now, it should also, for the students who, they need to be put in their right place. For example, if a child has dyslexia, it would be great if there was an entire school, if the community is large enough to support one, where all the students have dyslexia and the teachers and staff are also trained in dyslexia and how to help these students better. I know this pretty well because my mom was a school teacher and she dealt with special needs children, and she talked about this a lot. There were parents and the teachers alike, that they had no idea what it was that they were talking about, and she would sit with them and talk to them and explain, if you do A, B, and C, it'll help your students or your child, whichever the case may be, for the teachers or the parents, whatever. And there were quite a few students where she was able to get them out of her class and put them back into a normal classroom setting. There were also plenty of them where they just didn't care, especially with the parents. She told me over this one story of this woman where she came in wearing black tights, a little pink tutu kind of thing, the little pink fluffy thing, smoking a cigarette, drunk, and it's because she was worthless. She wasn't married to the father of the child, gone his own way or whatever, I don't know, and she was living at home with her parents and she wasn't working. She didn't give a damn about her child. She came in there drunk looking for her kid, and it's like by law they had to give her the child. And I think a little bit of it was because she couldn't have the child, but because she was living with her parents, she could. So she was like treading on thin ice, but it's like, yeah, but she was like junked out. She just wasn't an alcoholic. She had problems with the law and other substances as well. But it just, whenever you have the ability to choose what's best for you in your situation and whatever needs that you have, you're going to be able to at least have that option to get the best that you possibly can. But that means that the government needs to get the hell out of the way. We don't need all this red tape. We're capable of doing these things ourselves. These politicians, they don't know us. How many politicians have you really sat down with? It's like some political offices only hold for 2 years, some for 4 years, and some, like the presidents, it's only 8 years, 2 terms of 4 years, and that's it. How many of them have you met? Governors, mayors, senators, state, federal. I probably have met a few through my life, and I don't care if I meet them or not. Doesn't mean anything to me. They're worthless for the most part.
Late into economic change. As of 1940, more than 4/5 of black families, 87% in fact, lived below the official poverty level. By 1960, this had fallen to 47%. In other words, the poverty rate among blacks had been nearly cut in half before either the Civil Rights Revolution or the Great Society social programs began in the 1960s.
Cut by half on its own. Why? Because whenever it really comes down to it, people aren't stupid. Whenever they start seeing that this stuff works and I want better for myself and for my children, maybe I should give this a try. Because like I showed in that video yesterday with those hillbilly crackers from the South, those poor white folks, what was that, back in the 50s and 60s with that first photograph that they showed, kind of beyond, further past that day, earlier in our history, that it was white folks that were trash, especially in the South, hands down, just completely stupid. And part of it was they were kind of isolated because of the terrain that they had. And then he goes on to talk about how this was something that happened with Africa, that they didn't have navigable rivers. I also saw another video where he was talking about this, that they also don't have deep shorelines. So you can't bring big vessels up. The shores are very shallow. And their rivers too, Africa's kind of on a big plateau. And with the video it showed it's like, here's Africa and then drop off cliffs. And then you get down finally to the coast. It's just these cliffs. And then there's the coast right there. And there's only like this much of water. And even in like the 2 rivers, one of them was like the Nile. It's only for a very small portion of the year that they have enough water to allow boats that have engines to be able to go up and down and ferry goods to and from in these areas. And it's just like the terrain with Africa just sucks. And then you compare it to something like Asia or the Americas, it's like, oh no, they've got this going the other way around. And that just the terrain in and of itself created natural harbors where you have these little jettisons of land that stick out that act as a break against the hard waves that come on in, making it easier to load and unload directly from shore. And later with dredging equipment, allowing more of this to happen. And a lot of this just is not able to happen in Africa, even with the equipment that we have. So, but hopefully we'll continue to develop more things that we can do to help out these areas. And some maybe in other ways, such as just bringing it in by train. But this is just, you need to be careful when you're listening to the mob, you need to know what's going on. And this relays on over to this next one here. With this one is from Steve Lato, and that's his name and the name of his channel. Title of this video is New York Police Department Cop Sued 46 Times, Has Cost City $1 million so far. So all this that's being said is stupid.
Cost the city more than $1 million in lawsuits after being sued 46 times. 24 lawsuits have been settled for illegal arrests, raids without warrants, unconstitutional street stops, and meanwhile, there's another 22 suits still pending against him.
I don't care. You can sue anybody for anything, anytime. We can sue each other for the same damn thing. It doesn't mean it's true. What actually happened? What was he being sued for specifically?
So this is a guy who is a police sergeant at the NYPD, and in the course of his business, what he's doing on the job, he's cost the city more than $1 million, and that's not...
No, he is making an assumption that he's costing the city this stuff. It's like, for all you know, is that he's a target. And that people have learned that, hey, you know what? I can press charges on this guy, and because he has this rap sheet, and if I have something that just sounds halfway good, I can walk out of here with some money. Because he has 46 charges pressed against him, and they paid out. And he's got like another 22 that are still being looked at right now currently. It's like, just because this has happened doesn't mean anything. Jordan Peterson did an interview with the BBC, British Broadcasting Communication Network there in the UK, with Kathy Newman. And one of the things that they reported after the interview was how the death threats started to come in from Twitter and the police got involved. And Jordan Peterson said, yeah, and so what? Anybody can call in the police for anything. Just because the police were called in doesn't mean anything. They did nothing. You know why? Because there was nothing going on. You know what happens with Twitter and being angry and having the mob come after you and death threats? You know what that is? That's common for people who are popular and famous, who are well known. That's just an occurrence that happens all the time. And if you know these people and you follow them, they're all going to have these stories. Have you ever heard a story of people being threatened over Twitter or Facebook or any other of these social media platforms? It's like, I sure have. So just because it happened doesn't mean anything. What really matters is that, why aren't you telling us the specifics about this? If this is such a bad thing and this cop is so horrible, then why aren't you telling us the specifics of both sides so that we can make judgments for ourselves? It's like, I don't need you to hold my hand. I don't need you telling me part of the story. You can take that condescending attitude and you can shove it.
Counting the 22 other pending lawsuits, New York City has reportedly paid more than $1 million settlements for 24 lawsuits against the man. He's known as Bullethead. He's been sued for illegal arrests, raids without warrants, unconstitutional street stops.
I don't care what he's been sued for. I don't care what his nickname is. None of this means anything. This is why you go to the courts and you have to bring facts. Not accusations, not the mob, not nicknames.
The largest settlement was reportedly for $103,000, but most of the lawsuits have settled for tens of thousands of dollars. So it's not home runs, it's just singles.
I really don't like that he laughs either. It's like, you're a lawyer. I want some legal advice and insight on these things from a legal lawyer's perspective. And it's like, if you went into court and you were acting like this, the judge would get all over him. And it just irks me. One of my pet peeves, I guess.
The lawsuits go far back as 2011 and are up until now pending still. And he is believed to be a contender for the title of most sued cop in New York.
Again, I don't care. It means nothing.
Employer, due to an employee cost them $1 million in liability for 40 different lawsuits. At some point, any reasonable employer would say, I can't keep you on.
No, this is just somebody, he's reading some article segment that someone wrote in there, and it's like, no, it's not. This is not reasonable at all to say that, because you don't know what's true or not. is this cop really bad or is the cop really good? Because you can change it around and say, this cop is so great that they're able to deflect all of these fake accusations because he still has his job. It's been over a decade. I can't remember. It's like 11 years or 16 years, something like that. Might be doing something right.
Meanwhile, the man has also been cited several times for failing to log police activity and was docked vacation days last year for making an unjustified stop of somebody in an automobile. So,
yeah, and you know, how many times do companies, businesses, the police, do they just cave into this stuff? Because it's like, it's just easier. It's just easier to just give them this stuff, shut up about it, and to move on. And we've heard this stuff about defund the police, we don't need the police, and how much they get attacked on all this stuff. I don't know why anyone wants to be an officer in this day and age.
he has been dealt with by the police department, for some minor violations there. But it appears that they aren't that concerned about the fact that he's been sued 46 times. And
that's right. They shouldn't be concerned. They should be concerned about his job performance. What has the man done? So I made a video of, maybe it was last week now, but not too long ago, and in it talking about this woman who was being nominated. I guess it was the Supreme Court justice, that one of them was retiring and they wanted to put her in. And they kept talking about how she was a woman and she was black. She was going to be the first black woman to be on the Supreme Court of Justice. And I was like, I don't care. I read part way into the article and I stopped. And I said, because I don't want to hear it. This is a waste of time. All they've talked about are characteristics that she has no control over whatsoever. It's like, is she better? Then how about you lead with that? Tell me what her qualifications are. Tell me how long she's been practicing. Was she a lawyer before? What was her stats with that? How many cases did she win? Did she lose? Tell me something. Tell me how she stacks up against the other candidates. And if she's the best one for the job, great. Then put her in there. And then I gave the example of whenever my mom was dying of cancer, I didn't care who that person was who had the answer. I did not care about these stupid characteristics, about their gender, their sex, their height. I don't care. It means nothing. Did they have the answer? Nothing else mattered. And the same thing with this. You put in a person who's unqualified, then all they're going to do is screw things up, whether it be with the law or with medicine. And I then later found out that she'd only been a lawyer for like a year or two, or a judge for like a year or two. She had like no experience whatsoever. It was ridiculous. There are judges out there who have been doing this for years, for decades. And you're not going to tell me that there aren't any black female judges who haven't been practicing for decades. I mean, you can just, on television, they had all those shows following Judge Judy, and it's like they had them all. They had men, women, black, white, young, old. They were judges. Because even though it was a TV show, all those cases were real. Were they hyped up some for the television? Maybe so, but they were still real nonetheless, and that was something that they used to say at the beginning of the program, that they signed some kind of like affidavit or some kind of paper saying that they were going to accept the ruling of the court, and that was kind of going to be the end of it, that they weren't going to take it in appeal. And part of that was that they weren't going to ever take any heavy cases, so it wasn't going to be, it limited it to a bunch of stupid little petty things.
And the first 24 of those lawsuits to settle or be resolved have cost the city $1,066,750.
Don't care.
And now we all know what's going on here. And that is that.
Could be the other way around. Could be, well, he saved the city $10 million because they were all asking for more and got it cut down, because it's like, yeah, there was a mess up, but it was like this, and you're overblowing it. And it's like, we need to be done with this and to move on. Who knows? They're not saying. They're lying. They're manipulating. It's fluff. It's BS.
The police are members of the union, and the union contract says that there's certain things for which they can be fired and certain things for which they cannot be fired. And the process for firing a police officer is extremely difficult. And
now, this is true too, because I have people who are my family. I have My mom was a teacher, a cousin who's a principal, and in other states, whenever my cousin has to go to some of these conferences, they will have conferences with other states. And he's like, there's horror stories about these teachers who are just absolute trash, but because of the teachers' unions and the contracts that they have, that it is incredibly difficult to fire a teacher. In some places, it can cost up to $100,000 to fire a bad teacher. Why should it cost $100,000 to fire a bad teacher? Teachers' unions, red tape, all of this nonsense that doesn't need to be there. It's like if the teacher's bad, they're bad. If they're good, they're good. It's like their work is what should be proof of this. And part of that proof, one of them is, well, how well are the students performing on the tests? It's like if you're really doing a good job teaching, then the majority of your students should be passing with good grades and not skimming, not failing, but they should be passing.
And apparently it's so difficult that they look at this guy and go, well, we can't do anything about it because of the way that the rules are in place.
But it's not impossible to fire someone. And if it's really this hard, then why aren't all the cops like this? Because the flip side with it is that, oh, I'm a cop, I can't get fired, and I can go nuts. Then why aren't there all kinds of cops out there going crazy and being nuts? If it's really this hard to get a cop fired, then why aren't more of them doing it? Maybe there's something to this cop that isn't right with this story. Maybe, just maybe, this cop is okay.
But a better way to look at this, I think, you ask yourself, how many police officers could you hire for $1 million? And then you realize that this guy is legitimately costing the city because instead...
Wrong. You are making assumptions based off of, again, mob mentality, a missing of facts and data and information, and mob rule is not justice. But that's what happened in the 60s with all this stuff, where the mobs came out in force, they demanded this stuff, and they didn't know what was going on. And that's what's still going on today, where they are not telling us the pertinent information so we can have a clearer picture, because this is no picture. This is no picture at all. There are no details with any of these cases at all. And you have to ask yourself, why not? It's like with 46 cases and 22 still going through the courts right now, you would think that there would be at least one where they would be able to give an example and say, look at how insane this is, and this is their history. But they didn't even do it once. And then right here, what he's reading from is from the Daily Mail. And this is New York Police Department Sergeant dubbed Bullethead breaks cover as it's revealed he's one of New York's most sued cops and has triggered buzzwords, man. 46 lawsuits resulting in 24 settlements totaling more than $1 million. And I'll put a link in the description below. I haven't read it, and it's because I just don't care. Because after watching Steve Leto's video and all the nonsense that they had in it, it's like it was nothing but garbage. So I don't want to read it. I don't want to waste my time. If you want to dive into it, it's like, I don't care, knock yourself out. But he mentioned it, so it's like, I bet I can find it. So. And then we have this article from the Washington Post, which I just saw on my homepage. And it's titled, Texas Faith Groups Mobilized Against Governor's Order to Criminalize Gender-Affirming Care. What a lie. So when Governor Greg Abbott of Texas directed his state's Department of Family and Protective Services to investigate medical treatments for transgender adolescents as child abuse last month, they found one preacher. They found Reverend Daniel Cantor, senior ministers of First Unitarian Church of Dallas. I don't know what First Unitarian is. Called the news a gut punch. It's like, I don't care. I do not care about a statistical anomaly. You found one. It's like, I live in the northern part of Texas. And you know what we have here? We have churches all over the place. It's like you can't go 5 blocks and there's not a church. Right out my door and down the road there's like 5 big churches that I can run around in like 10 minutes. If I increase my run and double it, I can probably fit in 20 churches in my run. Whenever I was doing my big long run of 14 miles, well, there's about 5 right here. And then they've got some smaller ones. I guess with the 14-mile run, maybe that one was closer to 20 miles. But they're all over the place. You see them everywhere. Dallas, too. Guess what? It's in Texas, too. It's the Bible Belt. They're all over the place. They found one that's called a statistical outlier. It means nothing. This is the same stupid stuff where they'll say something like, well, not everyone, not every man, every woman. It's like, that's right. But I don't care about your statistical outlier. Well, technically, that's not right because technically this could happen. Well, yeah, well, technically in 30 years from now, you could find someone who's invented a time machine and you can go back in time and get your mother pregnant. It's like, technically, that could happen. But just because technically it can happen doesn't mean it's worth a damn. People do it all the time. Oh, this isn't the way men are, or women, or blacks, or whites, or straight, or gays. It's like, yes, it is, because that's what the majority is. Just aggravates me. Pay attention. This is something that I'm trying to stick a little bit closer to, is that whenever you get into an argument with somebody and they say, well, it's not like that for everyone. It's like that for the statistical majority. That is the way it is with the majority of people. That is what I'm talking about. The majority of instances, whatever it is, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about some random fluke somewhere. I don't care. It means nothing. I can't do anything about that. Neither can you. Shut the hell up. Until you have a solution for those outliers that are out there, shut up. You are wasting our time. I'm gonna stop. I got other things I have to do. It's already gotten pretty late. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you later. Help me out. Just real easy. Just subscribe. Become a member. Share with other people. I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.